I still can't get over how well curbing racing game Boredom did. I've only averaged about 100 to 200 views, depending on the video, and you've made the video about my search for a racing game to sink time into the best one yet, not even knowing how well my Halloween special did. It didn't. But you kind folks in the comments left plenty of suggestions for what racing games I should try out, and once again I thank you for that. Like the last video about racing games, we'll look at a handful of different games and I'll share my initial thoughts on them. Once again, I can't look at every single one in the scope of one video, so I'll pick 6 games and do quick summaries on them. If you want to see more of your suggestions, then I'll do another episode with another set of games suggested by you. Or maybe just a deep dive on one game at a time, so I don't burn through everything. Now, if this video can get 1 like, I'll include Need for Speed Pro Street in another video, because I anticipate a mixed bag based on the words of Colorshed. Before we begin, I want to put one thing to rest. I didn't know Ridge Racer 5 had analog controls when I first played it. Bruce Mazey pointed this out and told me how to enable analog controls. I tried following his advice in PCSX2, but I just couldn't get it enabled for some weird reason, even after binding the analog button to one of my controller buttons. This is what I get for emulating the first PS2 game ever made. I'm sorry, Bruce, I don't know why it wouldn't work for me. I hope this video can make amends. In addition, there were a couple of comments that essentially said skill issue. Maybe it's because I have unrealistic expectations to get a hang of a game's controls in a day. Apologies if I dismiss a game based on just starting it, but in my opinion, the first impression is what has to reel you in to commit to learning it. I will never dismiss a game without trying it ever again, unless it's Carmageddon 64. Lastly, I'm sorry to everyone in the previous racing video. No one guessed the connection between the music of Wangan Midnight Maximum Tune and Midnight Club. The answer is, well, there's no direct connection, but the logos of both Wangan Midnight and Midnight Club look similar to each other, at least before Los Angeles when Rockstar decided to tweak it and not get in trouble with the manga. Nobody wins the prize, which was nothing. Well, nothing lost anyway. We start our journey by going back one game with Tokyo Xtreme Racer Drift, also called Kaido Battle Nikko Aruna Roko Hakone, after the mountain passes featured in the game. With Drift 2, I found the handling being too jerky and sensitive and wrote it off as another Genki game. Maybe it's because I used front-wheel and all-wheel drive cars. Maybe it's because I drive using automatic transmission because I'm lazy. Maybe it's the chase camera. Well, with this game, the chase camera is absolutely a problem. Not that the handling was sensitive, in fact, it was stiffer than the sequel. But when I swapped over to the front bumper camera, I could find more consistency. I also chose a rear-wheel drive car as my starter. I mean, how could your first choice in a Toge racer not be an AE86? The way the first Drift works is that you compete in racing challenges for money to upgrade your car in the daytime, then race against rivals for reputation during the night. If this gameplay structure sounds familiar to you, you probably played Need for Speed Heat. Now, this is still a Genki game with its handling, since it seems like they keep changing it every passing entry. I can get a better grip on this game's handling in the bumper camera, since it's the kind of simcade that's not super realistic. But then I ended up giving this game a 0 out of 5 because there's no Daihatsu Midget 2. This is the second best Toge racing game this side of Initial D Arcade stage, but, I'm actually getting a feel for it? We go from the mountains of Japan back to the highways of Tokyo with Tokyo Xtreme Racer 0, also called Shotoko Battle Zero. Unlike some early PS2 games, this one actually fits on a DVD, fitting more content and a couple of cool trailers. Zero continues the formula of the 2 Dreamcast entries where you challenge different rivals along the highway roads in Tokyo. The reason I went with this game instead of 3 is because the third game can't be 100%ed in the West. I was somewhat hesitant to play this game because of its budget looks and what appears to be a lack of licensed cars. However, the cars featured are closely based on the legendary JDM cars of old. A good car roster is there if you can get around the fuzzy licensing. My only complaint is that there's no equivalent to the 240Z in sight. Well, at the very least, I can't drive it yet. But at that point, I'm thinking of a completely different game. The way this game handles leans more to the arcadey side, with some of that trademark Genki driving jank. It feels kinda loose, but compared to the Kaido Battle games, I'm spoiled by this game's handling. And you're going to need that handling because there's traffic to swerve around in addition to racing rivals. You flash your headlights to challenge a rival, or they flash theirs, and it's off to the races. You both have SP meters. Don't ask me what they mean, I don't know. The further ahead you are, the more SP you drain from your rival. The inverse is also true if they get ahead of you. Whoever has their meter depleted loses the battle. If you win, you get money to upgrade your car with. If you lose, you only get pocket change. Did I mention that you can challenge rivals in a free-roaming environment along the defined route? Zero isn't too bad of a racing game if you can get used to how Genki racing games work. It's not mind-blowing, but it is a passable experience, especially if you like highway racing with JDM cars. The two trailers I mentioned, one is for The Fast and the Furious, and another is for an original documentary, Night Warriors, focusing on the illegal road racing scene that inspired this game. Cool extras. Next, we return stateside with Juiced, developed by, well, Juice Games. It's one of the many games that tried to one-up the Need for Speed games of the time. By that, I'm talking about illegal street racing in import cars. And right out of the gate, it has you picking your preferred cell phone. They were really trying to get into the culture of the time. Starting a race to try things out and, oh no. Yeah, this game isn't emulating well on my PC, even when running at native PS2 resolution. It can't be my PC's fault. Do you see why I prefer real hardware at most times? I will say, though, I do like the car selection. Unfortunately, this game gets a failing grade in emulation. I'd say I'd never dismiss a game without really trying it, but if I can't emulate it without problems, then I have to make an exception. Don't worry, there'll be another time. You know what? I'll make it up to you with another game. Well, since the last one was a wash, we'll wash it down with this game. Ridge Racer 2 for the PSP. We never got it here in the US, but we did get the previous game. The thing is, Ridge Racer 2 is like an enhanced version of the prior game Ridge Racers, including the first game's content and then some. We can't ever have nice things here in the States, like the Skyline GTR or Ninja Warrior without the sob stories. Anyways, I think we have a winner on our hands here, my friends. This is one of the most complete Ridge Racer packages. It's got a bunch of tracks from throughout the series, a selection of cars with their own drifting mechanics, and plenty of new and classic music. Again, why didn't we get this here? Why? I'm a big fan of how easy the controls are in this game, most likely attributed to the portable nature. I had little difficulty in getting a grasp of the handling, and the drift-centric focus to cornering comes with a bonus of some stylish replay moments. I mean, how can you not appreciate some fishtailing? And for a handheld game blown up to HD through PPSSPP, Ridge Racer 2 scales up very well, resembling a slightly less detailed PS2 game. This is one of the best looking PSP games out there, and it also runs at a full 60 frames per second. For a PSP game, it's quite the achievement. The main draw is the World Tours mode. Much like the past two mainline Ridge Racer games, you enter a series of races where you need to finish in a certain place to qualify for the next race. It has its own nostalgic theme to it as you race across different courses from throughout the entire Ridge Racer series, including Rave Racer and Rage Racer. You race in the trademark Ridge Racer way, drifting around corners and looking good as hell doing so. The music in Ridge Racer 2 carried over from the prior entry is okay. I'd compare this game's soundtrack to that of Ridge Racer 5, in which there are some standout songs, but the rest of the soundtrack averages it out to just okay. There's also classic music in the game, including a handful of the best songs from Type 4. Thank the Lord! Still, gotta be careful using some of this game's music online, since some of it could get a copyright claim. It's kinda like the conundrum surrounding the Hollow Bastion stage in Smash Ultimate. Ridge Racer 2 so far is a fantastic game, cramming all the best parts of the Ridge Racer series together into one mighty fine UMD. It also serves as a reminder that we don't ever get the best stuff from Japan, so play this any way you can. Do it for Reiko Nagase.
Okay, it's the last stretch. Keep it up. Finish! Okay, let's move on to the next stretch.
He's the one for me. There's no place I'd rather be. Yeah, yeah, yeah. To the finish line. Everywhere you look, he's right on time.
Next up, from my own short list, is another Ridge Racer game, R4,
Ridge Racer Type 4.
for the original PlayStation. And I think this one's another winner. I've already been drawn to this game watching, surprise, surprise, Digital Foundry's John Linneman talk about both this game and Ridge Racer 5. The man has great taste in racing games. Right away, this game oozes style in its presentation. The interface is flashy, the cars look pretty good, and the music is phenomenal. It's not much like the techno and rave of other Ridge Racer games, but a mix of dance, jazz, fusion, drum and bass, and other funky electronica. Here, have a listen. I think I've spent more time listening to this soundtrack in the music player than I've done actual races. In terms of modes to vibe to, the main mode is the Grand Prix, where you're a rookie driver joining a racing team to win the Real Racing Roots 99 championship. Much like the other games, you race through multiple events to move on to the next heat. Along the way, you'll unlock new and faster cars, so you better master them fast. Much like 5 or the PSP entries, you're able to drift through corners, but the way it works in Type 4 is much different. Your drift varies on how long you let go of the gas for after you brake. If you're using a car designed for cornering, however, just brake. It's easy to learn, but difficult to master. In due time, you'll be sliding through corners like the Drift King himself, Kaiichi Tsuchiya. The only thing that irked me about its controls is that it's got this backwards menu navigation just like Japan had. Circle, confirm, and cross cancel. Guess there's an otaku in all of us. I'm really loving Type 4 so far. I love its style, I love its music, and I especially enjoy its racing. I can't wait to unearth its other secrets. And Reiko Nagase is also here. Order has been restored. The game also came in a 2-disc set with a bonus disc featuring both the original PS1 version of Ridge Racer and a 60 FPS interlaced turbo mode. Check it out! Next up is Ford Racing 2, released in 2003 by Empire Interactive and Gotham Games, and developed by Razorworks. As the name implies, you go race with a selection of only Ford vehicles. This selection includes some cool ones like the GT Concept, the Indigo, the GT90, and the Mustang Fastback. It also includes some, less cool ones like the Thunderbird from Die Another Day and, basically all of the trucks. Oh, and if the shadows look off, that's one of the game's issues on PCSX2. The shadows don't render correctly, looking more like an oil slick perpetually attached to the bottom of the car. Switching over to software rendering fixed the issue at the cost of resolution. This is an arcade-style racing game, and I'm here for it. The handling is very arcadey. It's not super twitchy, but cars still don't like being thrashed around. The physics are also arcade-like, which means the cars are very bouncy and like to get on two wheels more often than not. For what this game offers, they're mostly the standard fare, like your regular races, your lap eliminations, and your cone gate challenges, while its most unique mode was Duel. In it, you face a different rival each lap. Neat! To progress through the game, you go through the Ford Challenge, playing through different themes of Ford cars with different events. Winning an event unlocks the car as well as the mode and the track you raced on. I didn't find races to be too frustrating once I got a grip on how the game drove, but I do smell rubber banding on normal or higher difficulty. It is dependent on what you're driving and what difficulty you're on. Overall, I think Ford Racing 2 isn't half bad. Sure, it's not my favorite car company, the presentation leaves a lot to be desired, and it's also another PS2 game on CD, but that's okay. It's simple, inoffensive, arcade-style racing. Plus, hearing one of the songs in the game took me back to times when I was younger, listening to that song in some random Flash game. It took me a long time to find that track, but I'm glad I did. Especially since it was in YouTube Content ID. That saved me one copyright claim. Well, more Maximum Tune music it is. Okay, I'm experiencing some serious deja vu here. I've been saving this one for last. One of the most unique racing games out there. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Racing Lagoon. This game has a sort of history to it that could fill its own video, but I'll keep it brief. For a long time, this Japan-only game was thought to be untranslatable, with its own Japanese dialect created for this game. I caught wind of this game from an article by Jalopnik about how this strange game existed and how there was finally a full English translation released in 2021. It only took me 2 years to try this game, but now I'm finally doing it. When I say it's a racing game, I don't mean in the traditional sense. It's a legitimate car-PG, blending a racing game with a JRPG. Thankfully, it's not turn-based racing, but there are random encounters. The story goes that you're a newcomer to your racing crew trying to make a name for yourself on the Japanese streets. And of course it starts you in an AE86 analog, because why not? The cars in this game, much like Tokyo Xtreme Racer Zero, are not licensed, but their silhouettes are very recognizable. Yeah, speaking of silhouettes, one of the major characters seems to drive a Nissan Skyline R31 designed to mimic the silhouette race car. As for the rest of the cars and customization, any part can go on any car. For example, you can take the drivetrain of a Honda Civic and toss that into an AE86, and it becomes a front-wheel drive Frankenstein. Or you could also make a front-engine Porsche. Man, wouldn't that be weird? Oh, wait. The racing aspect is decent for a PS1 game with semi-realistic handling. That means proper braking lines will help you win races, but you can still get into a controlled slide in the corners without completely spinning out. When we get to the RPG aspect, this is where I grew frustrated. You travel around the map from an overhead perspective with similar driving controls and run into random encounters with other racers who flash their headlights at you. If you win, you gain RP, which you can then use to buy different parts for your car. But it's also a double-edged sword. If you lose a part from your car. It's really easy to do just that if you're not used to the game's driving model. Thankfully, the folks who made the English patch also made a quote-unquote easy mode save file, which starts you with a late-game engine and chassis. It's almost like real motorsport. The best way to win is to bend the rules. I went to this file and it indeed made the start of the game much easier, with an inline 6 stuffed inside my AE86. And I got a race against an SUV with a diesel engine this time instead of the 2 million Toyota Chasers that plagued my first run of the game. I can only imagine what a mid-engined SUV would look like. Racing Lagoon is a very interesting take on the racing genre, combining JRPG elements with a racing game. It's got a handful of features that separates it from the pack, such as being able to Frankenstein your own car, plus the racing music is pretty good. But many parts of the game needed more time to cook, such as the non-RPG modes, or mode, and all of the other JRPG stuff, like the random encounters. The early game is very unforgiving, and like I said, all it takes to turn someone away is a bad first impression. But if you dig JRPGs, early game grinds, or pain and suffering, you might walk away with a better first impression than I did. Square would continue their racing efforts on the PlayStation 2 with Driving Emotion Type S, but it wouldn't carry anything over from this ambitious CarPG and would actually end their involvement in racing games altogether. And no, Chocobo GP doesn't count. It's one of those games that's cool that it even got here in this form, but at the same time it's also one that I would have preferred to be left in Japan. Really, I could take this or leave this. It's got some good ideas that were ambitious and deserve to be used in another racing game, but the execution here just didn't do it for me on my first attempt. Which is why I chickened out and started with the easy mode save on my second effort. Now that I've stopped making up excuses to not play these games, I've walked away with newfound appreciation for some of these older racing games. Sure, they have their quirks, what doesn't? But they're quirks that make them stand out. There's Type 4 with its stylish presentation, Ford Racing 2 with its arcadey physics and car collections skew, and the Tokyo Xtreme Racer games with racing you rarely see nowadays. And then there's Racing Lagoon with its ambitious CarPG blend with 90s aesthetic. Before we close up shop with this video, I'm letting you all know that I won't be pivoting towards one specific genre of games. To focus on one genre leaves out the whole picture of games out there. It just so happens that racing is one of my favorite genres, and at the end of the day, talking about things that I'm passionate about in gaming is what I love to share. Once again, thank you for all your suggestions and support. Until next time, this is Squiddy the Kid signing off.